2035 qui consiste à d'abord produire, mais aussi utiliser ses propres ressources pour Djibouti, était faite pour attirer les investissements nécessaires étrangers dans le secteur de l'énergie. Sur ce, depuis 2015, nous avons libéralisé le secteur de l'énergie, une partie du secteur de l'énergie, la partie production de l'énergie, et la partie commercialisation et réseau est restée sous le gîte de l'électricité de Djibouti. Et donc depuis 2015, Djibouti a amorcé sa transition énergétique, a attiré les investisseurs. Le premier investissement qui a été fait sur les énergies renouvelables sont aujourd'hui les projets éoliens. Des 60 MW du Gobet qui est en phase de production. Nous avons le deuxième projet solaire que nous travaillons avec la société émirati Amea Power de 25 MW et 10 MW de batteries de stockage. Et nous travaillons aussi sur d'autres secteurs que sont la géothermie, l'hydrogène, la biomasse ou waste energy, comme vous le comprenez, pour pouvoir plus libéraliser le secteur, pour que nous ayons un développement énergétique dans le développement économique de Djibouti avec notre potentiel énergétique. Sur ce aussi, le deuxième objectif du gouvernement de Djibouti est d'utiliser ses propres ressources pour produire, pour arriver à une indépendance énergétique. Merci.
Thank you. And what is your message to investors today about why they should come into Djibouti, why they should support your government and what it's doing? What's the underlying message?
Oui, le message est clair. Comme vous le savez, Djibouti est situé dans un endroit stratégique de la Corne de l'Afrique, au carrefour des trois continents. Nous offrons un large potentiel d'opportunités économiques, proprement dit, pour pouvoir attirer les investisseurs. Nous avons mis en place un code des investissements propice aux investissements étrangers qui est en vigueur depuis plus de 10 ans à Djibouti. Nous avons libéralisé le secteur de l'énergie. Donc aujourd'hui, Djibouti est à la croisée du chemin pour son développement. Toute la législation ou l'arsenal juridique et réglementaire pour attirer les investisseurs sont présents à Djibouti. Et nous demandons à tous les investisseurs, bien entendu, de venir investir à Djibouti dans le secteur de l'énergie, mais aussi dans les autres secteurs économiques du pays. Merci.
Thank you. Let me jump across the continent to West Africa, to Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, and the NSIA in 2023, a couple of years ago, launched Ripple, the renewable energy platform. And this is focused on energy generation, distribution, and battery storage. Tell us a bit about that and how this will scale renewable energy access in Nigeria, and if you see parallels in the rest of the continent.
Thank you very much. And just to piggyback on a comment that you made around capital mobilization and how it relates to Ripple, I think capital mobilization in general is a theme that at NSI we are extremely focused on, and we try to implement that through a number of facets. First of all, project preparation. I think that's an area, particularly within Nigeria, that needs particular focus. Preparing bankable propositions that have the capacity to scale. And that's an area where, alongside AfrExim, we have created a project preparatory facility to focus along that line. Secondly, as you rightly said, we have conceptualized, developed, and operationalized a platform called Ripple, a renewable investment platform for limitless energy that's focused on 3 areas. The first is around diesel displacement, the second is around PV and battery manufacturing, and the third is around franchising, essentially being a distribution company within a DISCO. So providing equity to renewable energy propositions to allow them scale. And then I think the third area where I think particular focus can be on is this notion around blended financing. So we have provided a significant amount of first loss that will catalyze particularly conservative capital. As you know, the killer of renewable energy projects in Nigeria is around currency mismatch. So raising capital in FX to finance projects that provide returns in Naira. And so ensuring that you are able to essentially credit enhance to make sure you mitigate that risk, I think that's another area that we have been very focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's turn to geothermal. We've got two geothermal experts here. Phil Harms, let me turn to you first. So just explain a bit about the Rift Valley and why it's such a strategically important region for investment in geothermal. And with that, talk a bit about the offer of the stable baseload power and what financing policy frameworks you see that can de-risk this sector that's otherwise has some risk.
Sure. So thanks for the question. Thanks for having me up here. So geothermal is driven by geology. So we're a Canadian company. We're experts in geoscience and drilling. A lot of that expertise has been gained doing oil and gas exploration. But what we see is a huge opportunity in East Africa to utilize geothermal resources. The reason why geothermal has so much potential here is because we're basically at the junction of three tectonic plates that are spreading apart. When the tectonic plates spread apart, heat from the earth comes close to the surface, which gives very favorable fairways for geothermal. Djibouti actually exists right at the triple junction between these three tectonic plates, making it very favorable for geothermal development. And then continuing down south, the Rift Valley goes through Kenya, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and then the eastern arm of the rift goes all the way down to Mozambique. So you've got this long fairway that's mostly underutilized, but there's one successful case study, which is Kenya. Kenya's got about 50% of its electrical power generation from geothermal already. So that's the proven business model in the rift, proving that the resource can be exploited. So what we're trying to do as a private company is come in, deploy this expertise to unlock this vast resource that should be the dominant baseload resource for the region. So to that end, geothermal's real strength is that it's baseload. So, you know, there's been a lot of wind and solar installations. So you need to combine these intermittent power sources with some sort of baseload. So geothermal can provide that at a very low land footprint per megawatt, the lowest of all the renewables. And then furthermore, the resource, it's being developed, but not, it's being developed, but you have to explore for it. So you have these high upfront risk capital disbursements that need to be made. So that's where some of these financial mechanisms come in. So many of the governments have a geothermal exploration office in Djibouti. It's called ODEG, and they do a lot of the upfront exploration work to try to de-risk the resource so that private companies can come in. And then there's also some programs. One of the biggest ones is the GRMF, which is a Geothermal Risk Mitigation Fund. They'll provide some grant financing for surface studies and the early exploration drilling. So those are two of the programs that we see. But geothermal to date has been sort of the laggard on the renewables because of this high upfront hurdle of capital that's required.
Okay. Minister, I don't know if you would like to come in on that, of how you see that from a government perspective here in Djibouti, the risk of around geothermal and how you tackle that.
Oui, la géothermie à Djibouti est un sujet très sensible, car nous avons, comme mon collègue l'a si bien décrit, la géothermie est une ressource qui sert d'abord pour une énergie de base, pour toute énergie renouvelable, et très difficile d'abord à forer, à explorer. Et vous savez très bien que les sociétés ne viennent pas pour faire de l'exploration. Les sociétés étrangères viennent pour investir, dépenser, produire et gagner, avoir un revenu. Et pour tous les pays aujourd'hui que nous avons vus, surtout les gouvernements ont pris ou ont fait des prêts pour pouvoir explorer, pour avoir et confirmer cette ressource si elle y est ou elle n'y est pas dans le sous-sol de chaque pays. Chose que nous avons fait aujourd'hui. Je crois que nous avons, le gouvernement de Djibouti a commencé cette exploration depuis plus de 40 ans. Et nous avons travaillé et fait des campagnes de forage depuis 40 ans. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes arrivés au bout du tunnel et nous avons une confirmation des sources. Car la géothermie, comme elle est si bien décrite, a des ressources, soit une source d'eau chaude, soit une source de vapeur. Les deux sources sont confirmées à Djibouti, mais contrairement au Kenya, qui est un champion de la géothermie, qui a développé plus de 800 MW aujourd'hui, et qui est bien entendu sur le Rift Valley, nous avons un relief accidenté sous-sol. Chose que ça nous a pris du temps, ça nous a pris beaucoup de campagnes, mais ça a eu aussi un coût pour Djibouti. Aujourd'hui, nous avons disons les 50 millions de dollars d'exploration qui a été dépensé pour prouver d'abord et explorer, faire des forages et confirmer que si cette ressource est là ou pas. Nous avons aujourd'hui que cette ressource est là, mais elle est difficile d'extraire. Il faut bien adapter. Chose que l'Office du développement de la géothermie, l'ODEC, a été créé en 2015-16 pour pouvoir d'abord avoir cette entité qui s'occupe uniquement de la géothermie. Deuxièmement, pour pouvoir former les Djiboutiens, parce que les Djiboutiens, à part quelques chercheurs ou ingénieurs, géologues, nous n'avions pas les ressources humaines nécessaires pour pouvoir forer, pour pouvoir travailler dans la géothermie. Chose qu'aujourd'hui nous avons formé et nous sommes prêts à répondre aux défis de la géothermie, car nous avons plus de 200 aujourd'hui ingénieurs qui travaillent à la géothermie, à l'ODEC, et qui travaillent sur les projets géothermiques. Et troisièmement, la complexité d'interpréter tous les systèmes techniques des forages. Et ça acquiert beaucoup de technologies, ça acquiert aussi beaucoup de financements. Et nous travaillons aujourd'hui à ce que, dans la dernière phase, nous avons fait les campagnes de Fiale, nous avons fait la campagne de Halle Grabes, nous avons fait la campagne de toutes les régions. Nous avons une quinzaine de sites aujourd'hui disponibles sur l'étendue du territoire national. Et l'ODEC aujourd'hui est en face de finir d'abord ses études d'exploration pour pouvoir passer à l'exploitation ou à la production d'énergie, surtout sur le sud du lac Assal, qui a des ressources nécessaires. Le potentiel géothermique à Djibouti est estimé à plus de 1000 MW. Et avec notre politique de transition énergétique, notre politique d'utiliser 100% d'énergie renouvelable, nous avons besoin de cette énergie de base qu'est la géothermie. Donc nous y travaillons et avec l'ODEC, l'organisme dédié du gouvernement de Djibouti pour la géothermie, mais aussi le secteur privé, comme nos amis de Fort Ressources qui sont intéressés pour le développement. Nous travaillons avec des partenaires comme la JICA, la Banque mondiale, l'AFD, pour pouvoir développer et passer à cette phase production que nous espérons, parce que je suis optimiste, que nous allons réussir à produire les premiers mégawatts dans les années à venir, Inch'Allah.
Thank you, Minister. Helen Robinson, let me bring you into this with some context from the International Geothermal Association and the R&D that you manage. Give a bit of context of why geothermal is so essential to enhancing Africa's energy mix, and I wonder if you can also speak to the projects in Tanzania and Zambia under your oversight and the challenges that you face. You know, we heard the Minister describe some of the challenges from Djibouti. Give some parallels to that you're seeing elsewhere.
Yes, thank you for the question and the invitation to join everybody today. I mean, to be honest, you know, Phil and the Honourable Minister have, you know, touched upon quite a lot of, you know, given a broad coverage of the challenges and what have you within the geothermal space right across the African continent. I mean, from a benefits perspective, they are quite vast, and they're probably much greater than people realise. You know, it's grid stability, it's load adjustment, so a lot of our systems can be adjusted to match load demand, peaks and troughs within the demand. Phil touched upon sort of the base load, the 24/7, the 365 days. It is always there. And, you know, energy security, there's been a lot of conversations over the last couple of years about energy security and how we address those challenges as well. And geothermal has a great opportunity to bring energy security into any country that's you know, utilising that resource. We also, you know, across the African continent, whether it's here in the Rift Valley or elsewhere, you know, we see 600 million people without access to electricity. You know, that's 88% of the world's population that does not have access is here on the African continent, which is a terrible number. But we also need to look at things like the opportunities for heating and cooling, and where industrial heating currently puts a demand on the grid, and how we can shift that to geothermal, which is immediately beneath our feet. We also need to think about industrial power and how we can decarbonise that for manufacturing, utilising that for the mining sector as well. And, you know, we're supporting economic growth. The IGA did some modelling about 12 months ago, and there is 3 times more employment opportunities within the geothermal sector than there is within the oil and gas sector, because it goes beyond development. It goes beyond putting holes in the ground and putting a steam gathering system and a power station in place. It's everything else that comes. So we don't yet have the right policies in place. So that is employment opportunities. We have the food security story, the health and well-being and tourism story that geothermal feeds directly into, and all the associated employment that can come with that as well. And so we have the opportunity to address so much more. We also have opportunities for lower energy costs. You know, for a levelized cost of electricity for geothermal is just about comparable with solar now, which is a fantastic thing. But to get us up and running, you know, the Honourable Minister touched upon it there, the expense that Djibouti has invested in developing their projects, and our upfront costs are still quite high. And it can be sort of perceived as a risk, because we're asking for people to invest in something that we haven't yet proven works. And so we do have an element of risk, because we may miss our reservoir. We've advanced our technologies in the understanding of the subsurface. We read and interpret this, but we are still trying to understand what the subsurface is doing, and some of the reservoirs can be very, very sort of confined, depending on where you're developing. You know, much of the development in East Africa, certainly in Kenya, has been done in caldera systems, and they're incredibly complex systems. And so we need to make sure we're really understanding that to improve our success rates. I mean, I could go on forever.
And we'd love you to, but I do want to find out more about Tanzania as well, and also Zambia, and just some context and parallels with, from those case studies.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched upon Kenya. You know, they've just topped the 1 gigawatt club, so they've got 1,005 megawatts of geothermal electricity on the grid, and that's partly because their government initially took the upfront cost, the risk of that cost, and now they're auctioning off the proven steam fields to the private investors, and so recouping some of that investment back. And we're starting to see a similar sort of approach to some of the sites in Tanzania. So we're just about to start doing some work in Meru on surface exploration, and that has been financed, actually, apologies, Phil, by the Canadians. So, and they're looking at power, heating and cooling, adding into what they're doing at Ngozi and Songwa. And then the Zambia project. The Zambia project is very exciting. It's a tri-generation project, so it's power, heating and cooling. It will start at a low installed electricity capacity of 3 megawatts, so that it's a demonstrable project to prove that the resource is there and that it works. 21 wells, all de-risked, all private investment. There's been no public investment in that project as of yet. The heating and cooling is focusing on the communities, so did a real detailed communities needs assessment. So pasteurization, grain drying, abattoir facilities through heating and cooling, bringing the jobs in there, decarbonization of those industries as well, bringing additional security to the region. But what's really exciting as well is that when that's up and running this year, it'll be the first geothermal power plant on the African continent that is not within the main body of the East African Rift. So no volcanic systems in sight. It's granite heat. It's granitic radiogenic decay from the granite, which is a completely new territory for the African continent. But what that shows us is we can do geothermal anywhere.
Fascinating. We're going to explore 2 other types of energy, which is nuclear and energy from waste, and then I'm going to go to the floor for questions. So if you have questions for the Honourable Minister, questions for our panel, I'll look to the audience and don't hold back. But let's go to nuclear now. Ryan Collier, CEO of Rosatom Africa. So Rosatom has signed numerous deals with African nations, and you're integrating another type of energy, nuclear energy, with the mix of different energies that we've just explored. How do you feel that this contributes to meeting industrial needs? How do you balance nuclear against what we've heard before? And I don't mean this to be a competing exercise, because Africa needs everything, right?
Absolutely, Kevin. Thank you very much, and thank you for the organizers for the invitation. It's my first trip to Djibouti, and I'm certainly hoping it will not be my last. So maybe a little bit of context. Rosatom is the Russian state-owned nuclear corporation. Our core business remains big block nuclear power plants. We have now small modular reactors, very active in research reactors. But beyond that, we've diversified over the last, I would say, decade. So we've installed 1.7 gigawatts of wind in Russia. We're busy with solar projects, hydro projects, here in Africa, in Mali, in Congo, Brazzaville. So I would really look at the company more as a very large green energy company, right? So we incorporate around 300 different companies. We employ just over 400,000 people. So to a certain extent, we are technology agnostic, right? So when we evaluate a partner country and sort of look at what is available, we advocate for using what they have, right? And a combination of different sources of energy is really what we look at when you're trying to solve something called the energy trilemma, right? So essentially your 3 core principles being sustainability or baseload or dispatchability, which is vitally important, price, and then environmental impact, right? And there's not many sources alone that can tick those boxes. So if we look at wind or solar, yes, competitive, environmentally friendly, but they are not dispatchable power sources. If we look at most thermal, yes, they are affordable if you have the resource, coal or gas, whatever it may be. and it is dispatchable, but then you have an environmental impact, right? So you can have a basket of sources trying to balance this delicate act. But where I really see nuclear fitting in is like geothermal, if you have it. Nuclear can pretty much be built anywhere. However, it ticks all three of the boxes, right? So it is ratified as green, even by the EU. Over the long term, the localized cost of electricity is very competitive, and it's very dispatchable. So from a capacity factor perspective, it's one of the highest, over 90%. So that's really where we see nuclear fitting in. I think in the terms of Africa, obviously, a number of African nations are exploring nuclear. So we've worked a lot in West Africa, in East Africa. South Africa has the only nuclear power plant currently, being Kuberg, but our flagship project is in Egypt currently. It's 4,800 megawatts. Beyond that, you know, grids cannot sometimes handle maybe 1,200 megawatt units, right? So we're actively looking at small modular reactors. And I think that's really, you know, sort of the future of the nuclear industry, particularly in newcomer countries, is small modular reactors that have lower capex and that can be integrated a lot easier. In the context of newcomer countries, we also have another offering which is incredible, which is floating nuclear power plants, right? And essentially, you know, we're able to let's say, very safely fast-track a nuclear program for a newcomer country and take on the liabilities and take the spent nuclear fuel and various other things that they potentially cannot do at this point in time, right? And I think it's a natural sort of progression in terms of joining the nuclear fraternity.
Let me ask the Honourable Minister, floating nuclear facilities, is that something that Djibouti might entertain?
Oui, pourquoi pas. C'est tout un challenge. Nous avons entamé déjà ouvert des négociations avec Rosatom et nous espérons signer un mémorandum d'entente très prochainement avec Rosatom et le gouvernement russe pour pouvoir étudier pourquoi pas une petite installation nucléaire civile pour Djibouti. Okay. Et c'est une chance d'avoir aujourd'hui cette énergie nucléaire aussi que l'Afrique aujourd'hui découvre. Et l'Afrique a besoin d'électricité. Nous, responsables, politiciens, leaders de tous les pays africains, nous avons la responsabilité d'éliminer et de donner accès à l'électricité à tous nos concitoyens sur le continent. Vous avez vu la dernière conférence à Dar es Salaam des chefs d'État et de gouvernement africains, la mission 300, avait pour objectif de donner accès à l'électricité à 300 millions d'Africains les 5 prochaines années. Et Madame ici présente qui vient de la Tanzanie, je crois, suivez bien cet événement. Donc nous sommes obligés de développer nos infrastructures sur le continent africain, que ce soit les infrastructures routières, énergétiques, portuaires et autres. Donc nous ne refusons pas toutes les opportunités aujourd'hui pour donner accès à nos concitoyens en Afrique. Merci.
Last but not least, Lindsay Nagel has promised the final piece of the jigsaw here, which is waste to energy, and you've got some fascinating projects going on in Sierra Leone, in Africa, but also in Sri Lanka. So I think it might be interesting just to kind of tell us a bit about those. What's the technology involved? What are some of the challenges, and how difficult is it on the African continent versus in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, thank you. Every jurisdiction is presented with its own unique challenges, but we believe that creating predictable and replicable development models is key to getting a project across the finish line. So whether that be geothermal, nuclear, solar, wind, or waste to energy, making it the same as much as possible is key. So with that, we've got solar projects in Sri Lanka. Solar is without a doubt the easiest type of energy to develop. But to both these points here, solar and wind are not on demand. They're intermittent, and they are not the backbone of an energy system. So baseload is really key. For us, in waste to energy, we're looking at modular technologies. Modularity reduces the risk, and then partnering with the local governments, whether it be at the municipal level, at the state level, Ministry of Energy, for example, incorporating the same commercial structure that we would use in Sierra Leone, or whether it's Uganda, Djibouti, doesn't matter, is key to providing for us in waste to energy. What is key is fuel security, so being able to integrate waste management and waste to energy is something that we think is a tremendous opportunity across the continent, and adding to that energy mix of baseload power that's really needed to help reduce poverty, increase GDP throughout the continent.
Thank you. Let me go to the audience. Do we have some questions for the Honourable Minister and the panel? Yes, sir, in the brown jacket. Just here, in the brown jacket. Are there any other questions after this? Please raise your hand. Okay, we'll go to this one. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman?
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Good afternoon. Actually, I have two questions for the panelists. My first question will be with Africa's vast solar and wind potential, what specific policy reforms and investment strategies are needed to scale up renewable energy projects and ensure, of course, affordability and accessibility for communities? If I repeat my question, with Africa's vast and solar and wind potential, what specific policy reforms and investment strategies are needed to scale up renewable energy projects and ensure affordability and accessibility for communities? Ma seconde question va au ministre, son Excellence. Quels sont les principaux obstacles empêchant Djibouti d'exploiter son potentiel en énergie éolienne offshore, bien sûr, et quelles mesures concrètes pourraient être mises en place pour surmonter ces défis? Et merci.
Thank you, sir. Honourable Minister, if you would like to take the second question first.
No, the two questions for me.
Okay, please.
Je crois que les deux questions sont pour moi. Si je peux répondre d'abord d'un point de vue général et politique sur le continent africain. Comme vous le savez très bien, chaque pays a ses complexités, chaque pays a ses propres réformes. Et c'est vrai que nous avons des lois ou des caractéristiques standards qui sont appliquées un peu partout dans le monde, mais normalement chaque pays a ses propres spécificités. Et par exemple Djibouti, nous avons choisi nous de mettre en place comme le standard international le dit, avec la libéralisation du secteur de la production d'énergie, de signer d'abord une licence de production pour l'investisseur qui va produire de l'énergie solaire, éolienne, géothermique ou biomasse. Et dans un second temps, qu'il signe un PPA ou un contrat d'achat d'électricité avec la société électricité de Djibouti qui va commercialiser cette énergie. Ces contrats, c'est du take or pay. Donc, qui a une durée de 25 ans. Si je puis prendre le projet, par exemple, le projet éolien. Le projet éolien, nous avons signé avec la société Red Sea Power un PPA avec un take or pay de 25 ans pour 700 kWh avec électricité. Qui sont à 20 centimes de dollars. Il y a des pays qui sont à 15 centimes de dollars. Il y a des pays qui sont à 16 centimes de dollars. Et chaque pays a ses propres particularités et spécificités. Et chaque pays négocie, normalement, chaque gouvernement négocie avec les investisseurs qui sont très intéressés pour la production d'énergie solaire et éolienne. Le solaire, l'Afrique regorge de ses potentiels. Et c'est une ressource que nous pouvons trouver partout en Afrique. Des pays ont très bien développé l'énergie solaire, comme par exemple l'Égypte, le Maroc et l'Afrique du Sud qui commence à développer le solaire parce qu'ils ont des problèmes énergétiques. Ces grands pays africains que nous connaissons tous, que nous croyons très développés, ont des problèmes énergétiques. L'Afrique du Sud, tu t'imagines, a des problèmes énergétiques. Donc, Djibouti, ces petits pays aujourd'hui, nous subvenons à combler notre déficit énergétique. D'abord, avec ces premiers projets qui ont été faits en 2011 avec l'interconnexion électrique avec l'Éthiopie et le développement des autres projets d'énergie renouvelable qui sont en cours. Le pic a été l'année dernière de 154 MW. Il a fait chaud l'année dernière, très chaud. Mais pour avoir 150 MW, il faut une disponibilité de 200 MW. Chose que nous mixons. L'énergie importée de l'Éthiopie, l'énergie produite à Djibouti avec les éoliennes et l'énergie thermique de nos centrales des Boulaos. Et nous arrivons, et nous sommes fiers de le dire, d'arriver aujourd'hui à plus de 80% d'énergie renouvelable lorsqu'on mixe l'énergie éolienne et l'énergie hydroélectrique qui nous vient de l'Éthiopie. Nous sommes à 80% d'énergie renouvelable. Nous stabilisons les réseaux avec les 20% restants. Donc nous pouvons nous vanter aujourd'hui d'être des pays comme le Portugal et le Guatemala qui ont amorcé déjà cette transition énergétique et qui utilisent plus d'énergie renouvelable. Mais nous n'allons pas nous arrêter là. L'énergie importée est une énergie qui nous vient dans notre pays. Il nous faut une stratégie propre au Djibouti pour avoir son indépendance énergétique et développer notre propre énergie. C'est pour cela que nous multiplions les projets qui sont tous en parallèle, la géothermie, le solaire, l'extension du Koubet, que nous pouvons aussi augmenter la capacité, et la géothermie, qui est un facteur essentiel, très important pour le gouvernement de Djibouti. Pour la deuxième question, pourquoi pas? Nous avons commencé avec une compagnie japonaise d'explorer cette opportunité. Et pourquoi ne pas développer d'éolien offshore aussi? C'est une question. Par contre, nous travaillons sur un autre projet qui est l'énergie de la marée motrice, l'éolienne marine, sur la passe de Koubet, dont le potentiel est estimé à plus de 100 MW. Ce projet est en cours. Et bientôt, nous allons parler et divulguer, officialiser les études et le potentiel sur la passe de Koubet sur cette éolienne marine ou marée motrice, avec ces potentiels en énergie marine aussi que nous avons. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Aminu, let me just focus on Nigeria and what you're doing to answer the question from the gentleman about the policy reforms needed. And I know infracredit is quite an important part of the NSAI's work on this, so maybe speak to that. And if there are any other quick comments from the rest of the panel, because I think we've got to wrap up after that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Just to keep it very simple, I think from a policy standpoint, as it relates to renewables, there'll probably be three things. The first is cost reflectiveness of tariffs. I think that is very, very important. Second will be around project preparatory facilities for projects within the renewable space to ensure that they are bankable and, importantly, scalable. And then the third would be around education, particularly for the regulatory space as well as the developer space. I think focus needs to be around there to make sure that megawatts that are generated have the evacuation space and ultimately the distribution space into those that would use the power. Thanks.
Thank you. Panel, is there any other quick thoughts on this? Or if not, I'm going to wrap up because we could talk forever. There's so many different sources of energy that we've been through today. So I just want to thank the panel. What a fascinating discussion. Thank you. And the Honourable Minister, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yes, for sure.
Gentlemen.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Test 1, 2. 1, 2, test. 1, 2, test. 1, 2. Test 1, 2.
Je m'occupe pas du live.
break was very refreshing, that you also enjoyed some inspiring conversation and some networking. Well, without further ado, let's deep dive into a dynamic afternoon with a chat with a guest whose career spans leadership at the very top of both the public and the private sectors across Africa and globally. He's the former CEO of Credit Suisse and Prudential and has held senior roles at McKinsey, as well as in the government of Côte d'Ivoire, where he served as Minister of Planning and Development. Today, he heads the Parti démocratique de Côte d'Ivoire, Rassemblement démocratique africain, and remains one of the most respected voices on the future of African governance, finance, and innovation. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's now welcome Mr. Tidjane Thiam for this fireside conversation, and is actually joining us virtually. Mr. Thiam, are you with us?
Yes, hello, and my pleasure to join you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being with us today. So I'll start straight with my first question. This forum has a long focus on PPPs. You were minister when Côte d'Ivoire put together some bold PPP projects. How did you make them work?
Thank you again. I want to say hello to, I'm sure, many friends I have in the room before I address the question. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
5 sur 5.
Perfect. Again, sorry for not being able to be there physically, but technology is wonderful nowadays. So how did we, it was in the 90s, really. And on dit la nécessité est la mère de l'invention. Donc, we fundamentally had no money. In Côte d'Ivoire, it was after the devaluation of the CFA franc in '94, and President Bédier, who had been successor of Rudbani, asked me to develop major infrastructure projects, and what were his words? Without any money. So we had to be creative, and we, knowing that there's a lot of capital in the world, we decided to encourage private capital to invest itself in infrastructure projects in Africa. Now, there are some prerequisites for that. So I would say capital is very risk averse, and you need to create the right conditions for people to be safe and confident that they're going to get the return over 20 or 30 years. So having a regulatory framework that guarantees that is very important. Having also people, because at the end of the day, we know in the cases, I mean, I can give you a few examples. We did the Abidjan airport in '97, renovation as a BOT, and we're actually doing now the extension, the second tranche. We did the Azito power plant, which had quite a high profile, one of the first IPPs in Africa, and we actually signed the third bridge financing in December '99, 10 days before the coup, so that project was also completed. So a regulatory framework that is confident, but I was saying the people, ultimately, when I would ask those investors, what did you tell your board to convince them? They would tell me, oh, we talked about the team in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ivory Coast. The people we could really rely on, their level of professionalism, their expertise, and that's often a factor that is not taken enough into account. But you need quality human resources, you need quality teams to develop those kinds of projects and interest international investors. I think the next phase for me of PPPs has to be using local capital, and we can talk about it maybe if we have more time, but patient long-term equity capital is something we really need. Pension funds are underdeveloped. We have a very young population in Africa. So the time is right to grow a pension fund industry and then be able to fund a lot of these projects which have revenues in local currency with local currency capital. Because that currency mismatch is really one of the potential pitfalls of these projects, because if you fund your project with euro or US dollar debt and you have a toll road and your revenues are in CFA franc, you're carrying a lot of FX risk.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, the time is now, and I really love what you said about necessity really sparking creativity, and I think Africa is such a good example for that. So you've overseen phenomenal growth in the companies that you've led, much of this through a push in Asia. You're back in your home country, and you're quite optimistic about Côte d'Ivoire, about Africa as a whole, as you are about Asia. What are the unique market dynamics that you can see here on the continent, especially comparing to Asia that you know quite well?
And when I went to Asia seriously the first time in 1984, so it makes me look very old, but it's what, 40 years ago. And I think Africa today is very similar to what I saw in Thailand, in China, in Vietnam, in Malaysia in the 1980s. The key thing for those growth opportunities is what I call compounding exponentials. If you have an economy that's growing exponentially, that provides you with a lot of growth, 4, 5, 6% per annum. Now, if you can find within that a market that itself is growing exponentially, then you're compounding two exponentials, and that's how you reach the 30, 40% growth rates. If you take Indonesia, where we built a really big business at Prudential, when we started, we had 800 insurance agents. When I left, we had 250,000. That's what exponential growth does for you. And they paid more than $200 million US dividend just Indonesia that year. So in Asia, what I identified, and it's something that exists in Africa too, was a need for health insurance, what we call prevention, in particular for the growing middle class. So there are new entrants in the middle class every year. So I say you're trying to eat a pie that itself is growing. So you're trying to get your share of a pie that grows faster than your ability to eat pie. So you can grow and grow and grow and grow, and you still are at a relatively low penetration. So there are sectors where such opportunities exist, certainly in fintechs in general, everything around payments, and that we've already seen happening a lot. But certainly a prevention gap that existed in Asia exists in Africa and can be filled. But there are also opportunities in the pension industry, as I said, because accumulating those savings gives you actually the capital to take advantage of those other opportunities. And I keep explaining that Silicon Valley would not exist without pension fund money. It's pension fund money that people give as a mandate to Andreessen, Mark Andreessen, to all the private equity players. They are completely funded by pension fund money. And it is that pension fund money that allows the risk-taking that is taking place in Silicon Valley and leads to the success stories that we know. So developing the chain of accumulating those savings and then putting them to productive investment in the local economy is key. So I said fintech, I say energy, I see solar as an enormous opportunity. The cost of solar has been divided by more than 300 in the last 30 years, and it's perfect for a lot of our energy needs in Africa. Because we have long distances. Oh,
Yes.
no problem.
Yes, I think we can carry on.
You're muted, I'm afraid, on my. Can you hear me, Asma?
Yes, we can.
I lost the sound.
Oh, can you hear us, Mr. Thiam?
Hello?
Our tech team?
Hello?
Let's give a couple of minutes to our tech geniuses. I'm sure they're going to sort it out. Mr. Thiam, can you hear us?
On règle le problème tout de suite.
Ok, donc je fais rien. Moi. J'attends, ok.
Let's be patient as well here in the room. We'll be back online very shortly, I'm sure. This is the beauty of technology and being live. Yes,
I'm
Monsieur
Marie.
Thiam, yes,
Oui.
can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Back
Can
to
you?
being connected. Over
Okay.
to you. Thank you very much.
Well, it was a great interruption because I was going to move from fintech to energy. I was going to talk about technology,
Exactly.
And telecommunications, which offers also great opportunities. And with the internet penetration we have now in Africa, there are all kinds of ancillary services around the internet, where it's delivery of goods or food that are there. I know there are examples in Egypt and in other countries, in Cote d'Ivoire, that are doing very well. But I want to mention the supply chain globally. One of the biggest inefficiencies in African economies is the supply chain. You know that anywhere between 50 and 60% of every crop in Africa rots on the field, i.e., never gets to the consumer. So the hard labor of our farmers, about 40 to 50% of it is wasted between the insects, between the lack of storage. It's an enormous economic loss. Having proper storage would allow you to kind of double the food crop production, reduce enormously the cost of goods. For instance, I think somebody was telling me that the Abidjan port is like ranked 350 out of 405 ports in the world because we import so much. We also have this built-in extra cost because the logistical chain is not efficient. And somebody in the pharmaceutical industry was telling me that most of the cost of pharmaceuticals in Africa is just transportation and logistical inefficiencies. So that is a way to have a win-win-win, a win for the consumer because prices will go down, a win for the state because they'll get more revenues, and a win just for kind of general healthcare, etc. And I can go on and on. In healthcare, there are huge opportunities that are also technology-driven. If you look at telemedicine and what people are able to do with it, and you look at the fact that we have a shortage of specialists, there are artificial intelligence systems that can really decouple the productivity of a doctor. All that done through a mobile phone. Those technologies exist. Education offers also huge opportunities based on technology, and I could go on and on and on. So really, for entrepreneurs, I think there is no shortage of opportunities. And I said in Cote d'Ivoire, I want to create a lot of Ivorian billionaires, but I also said I just don't want them to be civil servants. Mm-hmm. I want entrepreneur billionaires.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very strong message. And Côte d'Ivoire, again, I've done quite a bit of reporting there and met so many young tech entrepreneurs using technology to better our supply chain, especially in the agricultural sector, and definitely your country is at the forefront of that change that you are talking about. So, Mr. Thiam, we have time to go into our room. Actually, there are two questions that some of our participants have for you, and we'll go straight to the Vice President for the Middle East and Africa at Citigroup, Mr. Miguel Azevedo, for his first question. Can our team bring a microphone to him, please? Bear with us, Mr. Thiam. Sound is coming to Mr. Azevedo.
Hello? Yes. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hello, sir.
Very good afternoon. Thank you for your contribution. You've been on the side of Africa in many different capacities, but you have also been leading a global bank, and so you have seen the other side of things. And my question to you, and this was around 10 years ago or so, my question to you is it easier to sell the African story today or 10 years ago, and why? I have myself been selling the African story as a job, and for around 10 years, so I have my own view, but you will have a much better and much more fundamented view, so I would be keen to hear that.
I take the compliment, but I'm sure your view is extremely valid as well. So we should just compare notes. No, look, I think it's a nuanced answer. I think in one respect, which is scale, it's easier. Because I remember in 2003, when I was at Aviva, I was trying to convince the CEO going to Asia. His answer was, look, TT, I like you, but we're making more money in Liverpool than in the whole of Asia. All that Prudential makes in the whole of Asia. And yeah, it was true. We're making like 50 million pounds, 50. When I left Prudential, we're making £2 billion in profit in Asia. So when I talk about those compounded exponentials, it's really explaining to people what an exponential can do over 15 or 20 years. And I really believe this. The human mind thinks linearly, and the world is exponential. And in that gap lies value creation. And often when you're selling a growth story, the disconnect is people make linear projections. And they really don't believe your exponential projections. Whereas in the real world, in the economy, everything is exponential. You know, how does a palm tree grow from the little palm nut? Not linearly, it's exponential. Right? So conveying the sense of scale, they scale now and they scale tomorrow. I always tell people, and you know this, in 1905, Argentina and the USA had the same absolute GDP. In 1905, Argentina and the USA had the same absolute GDP. So if you base your investment on static analysis, maybe you say, oh, we're not going to the US, we're going to go to Argentina. No, with all respect to Argentina, but it would have been a very bad decision. So showing people, and China is a very good illustration of that. All the evolution of China since my first visit there in 1984 to today is so it's easier in the sense that quite a few countries have followed that path. You have all Vietnams of this world, you have all China. What you need them to convince people of is that you can follow the same path. Where I think it's more difficult is really the lack of patience. I was involved in negotiating the Gleneagles debt deal and telling people, there's a new generation of Africans, it's all going to be different, blah, blah. And people told me, no, if we give them that debt relief, they're going to get in debt again. And Mr. Thiam, you'll be back here begging for relief. And sure enough, in 2020, I was involved again in negotiations of a global compact and talking to some of the same people. It's quite embarrassing about new debt relief for Africa. So that track record is not helpful. And if we can avoid setbacks and things that bring more wind to a fire of detractors, that's also good. So I say it's a nuanced answer. I mean, in some ways it's easier, in other ways it's not. But if you force me, net, I would say it's easier.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you agree. I'm curious about your answer, because you didn't give it.
I'm more or less on the same camp as you.
Okay.
I think the opportunity is as big, but of course, there's only a chance of making a first good impression, and we have missed a few opportunities. And if we look at track record, namely in public markets, it's not stellar. So you need a reinforced conviction to go again. Yeah. But here we are.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you another thing, sorry, but I don't like conferences about Africa because I've rarely attended a conference about Asia. I've attended many conferences about Southeast Asia. I've attended many conferences about China. I've attended many conferences about, Korea. And I really think it's a strategic error to put everything in one pot, given the extreme diversity of Africa. If you take Europe, I always say, with all respect to Serbia and Sweden are both in Europe, okay? And nobody thinks of the two the same way. And that differentiation is also key in selling Africa. Myanmar is not South Korea. They're all in Asia. So I think that's also something, as we get more sophisticated, we need to be able to talk about. Ultimately, we all want all of Africa to develop, but it's not going to develop at the same pace or with the same path, So I would encourage people to organize more and more kind of sub-regional events, and I think we're more convincing when we talk in that way than when we talk about 54 countries on 32 million square kilometers.
Thank you very much. Let's now move to the last question of this segment and turn to the CIO of the Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund, Mr. Jean-André Barsin, for your question to Mr. Thiam, please.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Thiam.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
It's a pleasure to virtually meet you. I go straight to my question. So, as a CIO of a sovereign wealth fund, we are entering an ecosystem of financing in Africa with development finance institutions, commercial banks, public markets, private equity funds, recently private credit funds, and so on. And so, as a new kid on the block, I would like to know, how do you see the role of sovereign wealth fund in Africa?
Okay, that's not an easy question, but thanks for asking it, and congratulations on what you're doing, because certainly a key thing for me is when we get in power in Côte d'Ivoire is to have a sovereign wealth fund, because I think it's today a fundamental attribute. My view is that you have to think about your national portfolio of resources, of assets and liabilities, and I think the strategy is unique to each sovereign wealth fund. For instance, I would expect the sovereign wealth fund of Côte d'Ivoire to be a significant shareholder of Nestlé, okay, over time, because we're a major player in the cocoa market, and downstream integration would make sense for us. It won't make sense for a country that has no cocoa. So I think your strategies have to reflect your national endowment. What kind of resources do you have? Are you a logistical hub? Your logistical hub, maybe it makes sense to invest in those types of industries, and also think about several generations and think about diversification and how you can also be used as a hedging tool. The reason why I talk about Nestlé for cocoa is that when the cocoa price goes down, the Nestlé shares go up. That's a natural hedge. Okay, so I can protect the national income by doing that, and I don't need to worry so much about the cocoa price. So, and it will also give me a say in terms of the industrial policy and strategy of Nestlé and where they invest, when they don't invest. I just use that as an example. So I think that for Djibouti, you really need to be very clear on your national strategy, and then think about how your fund fits into that. You can't achieve all objectives, so you need to be also very clear with the government in terms of what are your KPIs, what are you going to, what is the definition of success? What is success 10 years from now, not 3 years, 10 years from now? What is success 15 years from now? What is success 20 years from now? And I think from there you can build something valuable. And I'm sure you've done it, but there is an association of sovereign wealth funds, isn't there? I know I gave them a speech in Mexico City in like 2014, something like that, where you have all the Norges Bank and PIF and Kazana and all this. So I think also integrating that community and having a dialogue with them. There's no point reinventing the wheel. I've had a lot of experiences, some good, some bad. Making sure that you make the most of that will be very good also. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you for your insightful
So,
answer.
when we set up our fund, we'll come see you. We can cooperate. Because also, sorry, but last point, among Africans, we have so much, if you look at the endowment of a continent. But actually, it's a bit a vision, that if you think about 10 years down the road and you have 10, 15 sovereign wealth funds in Africa of a reasonable scale, think about what they can do together. And if you take something, again, like cocoa, and you think about Ghana and Ivory Coast, if we work together and had a cocoa strategy, a long-term cocoa strategy, looking at that industry globally, there are a lot of things we can do. Sometimes we are too small, taken individually, but trying to get those synergies across countries, across products, I think can be very powerful. So that'd be my contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thiam. Thank you to you as well, Mr. Azevedo and Mr. Bassin, for your thought-provoking questions. Mr. Thiam, thank you very much once again for being with us today. You might not have been with us physically, but I think all of us concur that the quality of your intervention hasn't suffered at all. Donc, merci beaucoup une fois de plus. Applaudissements.
Très gentil, c'est moi qui vous remercie et désolé de ne pas avoir pu être avec vous. Et j'espère vraiment pouvoir être avec vous l'année prochaine, Inch'Allah.
Absolument,
Merci.
absolument.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous. Well, let's now continue with our dynamic discussions with two heavyweights in the world of finance and investment. And let's first welcome back Mr. Omar Ben Yedder, publisher of African Business. Omar, over to you.
Thank you. I'm not the heavyweight of investment. My friend Miguel Azevedo is. So round of applause for Miguel. We've got a few deal makers in this room and at this forum. We've got René Day, who's going to be on a panel. But another deal maker is Miguel, who's been observing the African market and other markets for many years now. And every year he tells me it's a hard sell, but every year he seems to be growing his balance sheet despite the headwinds. So what was last year like, and what's it looking like for this year to come?
I think last year was not great, to be honest. But when it comes to transactions, whether they are public markets or private markets, you cannot look into 1 year in particular. You have to look into 2-3 year cycles, because things take very long to close in emerging markets, and it's the same in Africa. If I look back, the last 3 years was actually pretty decent, so I can't complain that much. If I look forward, if you had asked me last week, I was very bullish. I am definitely much less bullish now. I'm actually very concerned now. I think it will be a very, very quiet year in terms of transactions done. Globally, and Africa will not be different, despite the fact that, as has been discussed this morning, Africa should be less affected by this tariff drama that we are going through. But the reality is, I think the capital markets and the financial markets will go on hold in terms of transactions. No one is ready to invest. No one is ready to invest in mature, simpler markets. Goes without saying that in markets where the risk profile is higher, where the return can also be higher, but the risk profile is higher, it takes longer to organize the transactions, I think people will go on hold. So I think this year will be very quiet.
And is that the same that you're seeing in the Middle East as well, where you're also overseeing that market?
So Middle East has been on a crazy run over the last 3 years or so, post-COVID basically, UAE and Saudi in particular. We are definitely seeing, we were very optimistic for this year. There's plenty of IPOs happening in the Middle East, in the UAE and Saudi. UAE and Saudi have more IPOs happening than any other country in Europe, just to give you a sense. So it has been really good. I think it will go on hold as well, definitely.
And people say, look, we need to tap capital from new sources or new countries, such as the Gulf countries, but you don't see much capital moving around in the next year or so.
I think some of the capital that you're referring to, which is sovereign capital, they are predicated on G2G agreements, a lot of that. And if I look, for example, the UAE, where I live, the government there has the capacity, they have the financial means, they have the financial resources, the excessive wealth that they need to deploy. They have the ability to understand the opportunities to go long, to play the long game. So if you have the capacity and you have the ability, you have the capability of actually doing things. So I would not be surprised if some of those institutions in that region use this opportunity to accelerate some of the investments they were already making. So in a sense, they may be the outlier because they have a long-term view. They don't need the markets to fund themselves. They fund themselves all with equity. And so this can actually be a very interesting opportunity, a buy moment for them.
And in terms of the sectors, I mean, mining is getting a lot of interest. We mentioned today the opportunity potentially from oil and gas, which is back in business, let's say. So where are you seeing opportunities?
I think oil and gas, they may do things here and there, but they are already very long on oil. So I don't think they will go much longer, i.e. buying further assets. I think if I pick a sector, it would definitely be mining. I think those countries, in particular, again, UAE, Qatar as well, sometimes we forget a bit about Qatar, they see the energy transition as somehow as a threat to their existing source of revenue, but also as an opportunity that they can tackle faster. And everything that comes with energy transition is also, on the AI space, which is heavily a heavy consumer of energy. So they are planning to invest there as well, data centers and all that. So I think mining, and in particular critical minerals, I think you will see a lot of transactions being done by the local players. And I was the other day, a month ago or so, moderating a panel with one of the sovereign wealth funds. And they actually created a new vehicle in Abu Dhabi to invest in critical minerals, and primarily in Africa and LATAM, and where they fund new projects. So this is primarily CapEx. It's not buying existing projects. And they will offtake the minerals themselves. So they guarantee the offtake. And so they will go along on minerals. So in a sense, they want to be in the future in critical minerals, the strong player they are today in oil and gas.
But they'll want to own the whole value chain as opposed to working with miners on the continent. They actually want to mine it, take it, and
they don't want to operate the mine itself, so they will team up with someone that operates the mine, but they will be the leading investor and the off-taker.
Okay, fantastic. And you said that there may be some positive news in the public markets, because I said the public markets aren't particularly active on the continent. So which public market should we be looking at?
No. If you look at public markets, meaning equity public markets, equity offerings, IPOs, and follow-on offerings, Africa has been very quiet, right? The last significant transaction out of Africa was a company called Crown Agent Bank Payments, CAP Payments. It was not a success, right? I think the share price is like 80% down, something like that. So the track record in the immediate past and the recent past has not been great. But I could see, namely in the bigger countries in the continent where the big institutions are, in Nigeria, I can see some stabilization. I can see banks raising capital. I can see people coming to us asking, how can I buy shares in Nigerian banks? I can see some interest coming back. This was true last week, is less true today, of course. But I think in the telecom space, there's a lot of talk around telcos and fintechs to do offerings, namely in the Middle East. There's some talk around that. So I think we are seeing the green shoots of a recovery in the public market when it comes to African companies.
Fantastic. A round of applause for Miguel Azevedo, who you all obviously know very well. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this insightful conversation. A round of applause, please, once again, for Mr. Azevedo. Omar Ben Yader, thank you very much. And we continue with the Powerhouse panel that brings together some of the most strategic minds in investment across the continent and beyond. And to moderate this panel, it's my pleasure to welcome back on stage Dr. Asha Leke, please.
There we go, it's working. Good afternoon. I think this is the last session between us and chill and dinner, so we'll try to, it's a very important one about investments in Africa. And so let me just start by inviting my panelists, Mr. Ahmed Osman Ali, who's the Central Bank Governor of Djibouti. Welcome. Aminu Umar Sadiq, for MD of the NSIA, the CEO of NSIA. Baruz Baramov, who's the Deputy CEO of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Azerbaijan. Welcome. And René Awambeng, founder of Premier Invest. Perfect. So we thought we'll actually end today with a discussion about investments. And we've heard a bit about Djibouti this morning, and we've talked about different sectors on the continent. But we thought we'll have a discussion with this esteemed panelist around investments in Africa. Why invest? What's the experience been? Recognize some of the challenges, but also talk about the opportunities. But before we talk about investments in Africa, I thought we should start with investments in Djibouti. And so we're very honored to have the governor of the central bank with us. So maybe, Governor, maybe the first question would be, what kind of financial instruments or reforms have you put in place to make it attractive for people in the room here to come and invest in Djibouti?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So I just want to say hello to everybody. Welcome to Djibouti. And please allow me to speak in French because my English will be short if I... Je pense que chaque pays a sa propre histoire et les investissements que nous attirons à Djibouti obéissent à des règles bien spécifiques qui sont un petit peu caractéristiques à la configuration de notre environnement économique. Nous avons, depuis quelques années, bien réfléchi aux avantages comparatifs que Djibouti possède pour pouvoir capitaliser dessus et essayer de trouver des capitaux pour investir sur des secteurs structurants pour l'économie djiboutienne et qui sont essentiellement orientés à l'activité économique qui fonde Djibouti, son économie, sa physionomie géographique, géopolitique, etc. Donc il a été recensé qu'il fallait appuyer sur les infrastructures porteurs de développement de Djibouti, essentiellement de services, de ports, et des routes, des infrastructures qui permettent à Djibouti d'exploiter sa région, sa position géographique pour pouvoir profiter de l'environnement économique de la région. Donc les investissements qui étaient recherchés étaient des investissements lourds qui ont été portés par des projets qui ont fait l'objet d'une bonne analyse au départ pour bien cibler et le porter essentiellement sur les ports, sur le chemin de fer, pour doper un peu l'économie djiboutienne et la remettre un peu sur le rail après des années et des années d'hésitation. Et ça sur la base des capacités qui existent à Djibouti, capacités financières, capacités régionales. Et ces investissements donc, ont bien été réussis essentiellement avec des ressources extérieures, notamment de banques chinoises, comme vous le savez. On a été très critiqués dans ces années-là où ces investissements ont porté la dette de Djibouti qui était de l'ordre de 40% à 70%, essentiellement portée par deux projets structurants qui étaient donc à la reconstruction des chemins de fer de Djibouti à raison de $500 millions Et puis un autre projet qui consistait à mettre en place un pipeline pour aller capter des ressources en eau, puisque Djibouti est une zone aride. Nous souffrons de problèmes de ressources d'eau. Et ces deux projets ont été donc un facteur qui a porté la dette de Djibouti de l'ordre de 40%, 70%. Depuis, les investissements se poursuivent et portent à la croissance. La plupart des investissements sont donc faits par des entités comme vous connaissez, Djibouti Telecom, entité appartenant à l'État, qui a pu investir aussi de sommes impressionnantes, mais qui avec des ressources propres captées sur les banques nationales. Il faut aussi savoir l'évolution de capacités que nous avons pu réussir à mobiliser à Djibouti. Nous avons, en même temps que nous avons réfléchi sur les contours économiques pour mettre en place des infrastructures, nous avons également profité pour mettre un petit peu notre système financier en place et améliorer ces contours en révisant les textes pour attirer des banques. La révision des textes et les réformes que nous avons mis en place ont permis de porter le nombre de banques en quelques années de 2 à 13 aujourd'hui. Nous avons fait des réformes sur la loi bancaire, nous avons introduit la finance islamique et tout ça a permis donc de diversifier un peu les outils, des mobilisations de ressources, d'inclusion financière pour des populations qui étaient hors banque, essentiellement pour des raisons de conformité par rapport à Charia. Et tout cet ensemble a porté à ce qu'on a pu, par la suite, après avoir fait ces gros investissements, réussir à entraîner une évolution extraordinaire des agrégats monétaires. Les crédits à l'économie ont augmenté avec des financements donc, de banques locales, les dépôts également, et tout ça porté par la croissance qui initialement était portée par la croissance, par l'investissement.
Et donc ça, c'était un peu plus dans le passé ce que vous avez fait. Si vous regardez un peu dans le futur, quel genre d'investissement recherchez-vous à présent?
Alors, pour le futur, compte tenu du taux d'endettement, l'État voudrait passer la main au financement par les privés, par des partenariats publics-privés, d'où l'idée de privatiser certains des actifs de l'État. Nous en discutons souvent avec les fonctionnaires, avec Slim. Et il s'agit de la privatisation de Djibouti Telecom. Il s'agit également d'envisager la privatisation future du chemin de fer de Djibouti, qui est donc un financement régional fait avec Exim Bank of China, qui souffre un peu de problèmes que l'Utopie a connus par rapport à sa feuille de route, par rapport à la matrice de départ qui devrait permettre à ce que l'exploitation de ce financement puisse rembourser les prêts. Il y a eu de retard pour des considérations géopolitiques, notamment sur la partie utopienne. Et il est question de privatiser. Il est privatisé pour pouvoir un petit peu redescendre à des normes plus convenables pour la soutenabilité de la dette. Donc le partenariat public-privé, et particulièrement privé, est très apprécié. Et la plupart des projets qui sont en développement, notamment dans la nouvelle zone de développement de la zone franche industrielle, dans la région de Damorejouk, il y a de gros projets qui sont attendus et qui sont donc laissés à l'appréciation du secteur privé, donc en télécom, dans les secteurs financiers également. Et nous avons, malgré l'arrivée de pas mal de banques, nous voudrions un peu plus de banques et qui nous permettent un peu d'élargir la gamme des produits. Nous travaillons avec la Banque mondiale. Je vois qu'il y a certains collègues de AFC qui sont là, qui travaillent avec nous sur la réforme des textes pour pouvoir mettre en place des systèmes financiers qui soient capables de faire du crédit bail. Nous jouons sur l'inclusion financière pour essayer de capter une bonne partie de l'épargne qui circule dans les secteurs informels à travers l'inclusion financière, la modernisation, tout ça pour permettre un peu à ce qu'il y ait des capacités à la fois financières et intellectuelles, tout en mettant aussi l'accent sur la formation, contenue à la fois pour le secteur, mais pour la Banque centrale aussi, pour mieux servir son rôle de contrôle, de supervision, pour améliorer tout cet ensemble-là.
Okay, parfait. Merci, Monsieur le Gouverneur. Barouz, let's turn to you. I always say, it's not every day that we see Azerbaijan showing up at an Africa conference. So my first question is why the interest in Africa?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the organizers, especially to Mr. Slim Priani for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here in this nice country to contribute to this discussion. And we are the sovereign wealth fund of the country at the moment, investing across the globe. We don't have the mandate to invest domestically, so all our investments are across the globe, around 63 billion USD, and mostly in the public markets. And we are actively investing in the private equity, infrastructure, and real estate. The share of all these investments altogether in policy portfolio level is around 25% now. And although our current investments in Africa is around 400 millions invested in the fixed income and the IFC funds, actually our first investment in private equity was through the IFC in Africa, in Africa and Latin American region, and mostly invested in the financial industries and communication. So we know that we have dual mandate. We are somehow to preserve the macroeconomic stability in the country, and we are also acting like an intergenerational equity fund. We are one of the most transparent, and in terms of the governance, we are one of the most, I would say, the first ranked fund in the world. And this our fiduciary duty and extreme transparency led us to choose the global investment portfolio as a benchmark. And when you choose this kind of benchmark, the market itself is heading you toward the developed world. But when we have started to invest in the alternative investments like the private equity and real estate, and especially in current situation, where the world is evolving, we have started to look around the different geographies, which not the global market is heading us, like the Middle East, China, and probably the Africa is no more future, is the current opportunity. So as a long-term investor, which is better positioned for the long-term capital, I think we have to tap in and we have to invest more in this region.
I fully agree. If I may ask you another question, though, just in terms of, not from your experience, so you've had some exposure to Africa investments. From what you've seen and experienced, how can we as Africa position ourselves as a competitive investment destination in parallel with some of the regions you're most familiar with, like Central Asia? Well, what can we learn from you?
Yeah, if we look at the growth numbers, I think in 2025, the economy of Africa is expected to grow around 4%, and East Africa is around 5.5%, and in the case of the Djibouti is around 6.5%. So it's not only about the growth numbers. I think the demographic is there, the digitization is there, the regional integration is there. From today morning presentation, by the 2050, the overall the share of the Africa in the global workforce is going to be the 30%. It's a significant numbers. It's I think in the case of the Djibouti, I think over the 70 years you have managed to defend the PEG regime, which is not easy. It's very great success. It's one of the main pillars in the macroeconomic stability. So you have consistency, you have a leadership with the great vision. I think there is everything there for the long-term investments. Thank you.
Good. We just need to make the most of it. Let's move from Azerbaijan Sovereign Wealth Fund to Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund. So, tell us a bit about NSIA. What kind of investments have you done in the past? What has been your experience investing in Nigeria?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Slim, once again. So we are Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund. By law, we have 3 separate and ring-fenced funds. We have a stabilization fund that offers stabilization support during times of economic duress. We have a future generations fund that's a long-term fund. And then we have an infrastructure fund that by law is domestic. In total, both in terms of core and non-core funds that we manage, we're at about just over $5 billion. In terms of over the last 2 years, a lot of our investments has been focused around creating platforms. So finding strategic partners that essentially solve certain value dislocations in the infrastructure sector. Our portfolio consists of companies ranging from financial guarantors, infracredit, to an oncology and diagnostics platform, to a carbon credit financing and registering platform, to a renewable investment energy platform alongside IFC, and so on and so forth. So it's extremely broad-based. In terms of what the peculiarities of infrastructure investing in Nigeria are, if I was to limit it to 3, I think the first thing is that I think one has to be very comfortable with discomfort. That if you are going to execute upon infrastructure projects in Nigeria, capital is necessary but insufficient. I think you have to be comfortable rolling up your sleeves, engaging with the regulators, sometimes even around educating regulators as to what it is that you want to do so that they can regulate you more effectively. Rolling up your sleeves, engaging with those that you want to provide capital to, so that they can develop projects to the quality that is good enough to receive your capital. So I think that would be the first. The second peculiarity would probably be around risk-free rate. Last year we created a company alongside Norfund, alongside what was formerly called USAID, FCDO, and GCF, and it's called Green Guarantee Facility, Green Guarantee Company. And essentially what it is that it provides guarantees to climate projects in order to attract hard currency from the global north to the global south. Only $100 million of equity was raised, headquartered in London, no transactions done, but it was rated investment grade. And then you have sovereign wealth funds like us on the continent, managing billions of dollars out of the continent, earning US dollars, but are capped by the rating of the sovereign. And this is extremely deleterious for us because the rate at which we can raise capital in order to do projects makes such propositions unbankable. And so this notion of, what the risk-free rate is, this disillusion as to how risk is treated on the continent, I think is one that makes doing transactions extremely difficult. And I think the third would be currency mismatch. How to find innovative, creative ways in order to do large-scale infrastructure projects in local currency, whether it's through credit enhancements to mobilize domestic sources of conservative capital to our infrastructure financing, or whether it's the DFIs or the multilaterals, actually finding ways to actually provide that hedge required in order for local currency financing to flow into infrastructure projects. But those projects that actually succeed and actually scale are those that find a way to match the capital being raised to the capital in which returns are received. Thank you.
And I mean, just on the whole currency point, I was trying to understand. Last year, the whole talk was about sort of the devaluation in Nigeria, right? So tell us a bit this year, what's the investment climate? Has it changed? Has it improved? What's happening in Nigeria these days?
Thank you. Good question. I think it's definitely on the rise. It has significantly improved. The currency is a lot more stable, and we are seeing a lot of portfolio investors actually come into the country, flow into the country, and that has played a role in stabilizing the country. But what commentators would say is that nothing's really changed. The country hasn't really, in quotes, industrialized from last year to this year. The country isn't really exporting and generating FX in a manner that's truly sustainable for us not to be at the mercy of the next shock. And so we have to find a way of mobilizing long-term local currency towards infrastructure financing. I think it is only when we do that that in fact we would be able to undertake infrastructure projects at the scale that we need to.
Got you. Very clear, very helpful.
Thank you.
Renee, I think most of us know you at AfricSim. Now you've changed hats. So tell us a bit about Premier Invest. What does it do, but also why did you start it? No, just hold it down for a bit. The button.
Thank you very much, Acha. First, I must start by thanking the organizers for having us here, Slim and Excellency Governor. Thanks. It's always a pleasure to be back here in Djibouti. I think the rationale for Premier Invest is, after 30 years of experience, we need to find indigenous, nimble, and flexible African institutions that can catalyze and unlock financing into the continent. The pace of execution and getting things done with some of our partners, existing partners, is actually slow. So we actually went to the UAE and have partnered with some partners in the UAE to try to set up, first of all, an advisory business, and then secondly, early stage credit fund that would kickstart infrastructure projects in food security and energy security across the African continent. We come with a long experience of understanding what the challenges of the Africans in terms of the end users, whether they are small, medium-sized companies, whether they are governments, whether they are financial institutions. And we also understand where the capital is, but the capital doesn't really get to meet the people that need that demand. So we see ourselves more as a bridge. We see ourselves more as connecting. We run the same processes like DFI, so commercial banks, we do them, but we are faster. I'll give you an example. Last year we had a mandate in a Central African country. On the 14th of April, we signed the mandate, and on the 21st of June, at that year, we closed the $1.2 billion transaction. That was documented by UK law firms. So that only shows you that the money is out there. If you put the right team and the right people around a transaction, it is possible to close transactions quicker. So we see Djibouti particularly as a pearl for logistics and service into the continent. I don't know why we keep on talking about Djibouti only as around a port. We see Djibouti from Premier Invest as a service hub. Djibouti should be looking at both export and looking at import from a manufacturing perspective. Because under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, just say we were assembling or building trucks in Djibouti, we will be building 10,000 trucks here that are serving the Horn of Africa. Just say we were producing aggregate of something on Djibouti, we will be exporting on behalf of every other African country from Djibouti. This is what we try to do. So we can bring partners who are interested in using this platform, which has the right reforms, which has the right stability, which has the right currency, which has the right enabling environment to drive that investment with access to a market, not only a COMESA, but the entire Horn of Africa to make change. So we see ourselves as an instrument that uses money to make change faster, quicker, and more nimble.
Well, very cool. Money to make change. I love it. And so we hear about the opportunity in Djibouti. Where else do you see? Which other markets would you like to go use your money to make a change in?
So I don't want to repeat what Tijam said, but he said something very interesting. We always look at Africa and we think that everything is the same. In Europe, nobody will say, and I like what he said, nobody will say Serbia is equal to Sweden. African markets are very different. They're extremely different. What we do, for example, in Angola is completely different from what we do in Djibouti. But I want to focus on Djibouti and, let me say, Togo, where we've just made a presentation to the government of Togo, how they can use the port of Togo as a market for the entire Sahel. So the port of Togo is already a landmark port into West Africa. But the opportunity today, where the Sahel region is locked in,
to work with Togo to build not only that port, but storage facilities for oil and gas, moving it from offshore Lomé, which is in the ocean, into onshore, building railways, which is less than 700 kilometers, connecting arteries between Ghana, Benin, and the 3 countries in the Sahel, presents an opportunity to unlock 200 million people for a country which is smaller than Togo. So that's the kind of experience that we are bringing. And we're working with very, very, very big partners who have got either the funding or have got the ambition to work with African countries. So we are quite diverse. Our work is across Africa, which is our natural territory. We see ourselves as facilitating trade assets across South-South, working with other development partners.
Perfect. We have a few minutes. I think it's important to actually take a few questions from the audience, maybe 2 or 3 questions if there are. Anybody with a question? None. Oh, here we go. Dr. Slim here. Thank you. We'll take two or three questions, then we'll have the panel respond.
Thank you. Well, what a pleasure to have this impressive, diverse mix of people and friends. But this question is not for you, Mr. Governor. This is for our guests. Why are you here?
All right. Why are you here? Rene, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Premier Invest is here because we see Djibouti as one of the African markets where we can support, help to unlock capital, to participate in its development and transformation. And as I said to you, we can pick a few sectors, we can pick a few things that we can do together. Let us take storage, terminal, movement of goods and services into the hinterland. How we can have a one-stop shop. We can build a special economic zone facility that will service the hinterland and provide return for you in the sovereign wealth fund and for the future generations of Djiboutians. That is our mission, to use our expertise, to use capital to make change and impact in this economy.
Thank you. I mean, besides the fact that you love me, obviously.
That's what I was going to say, actually. So apart from that, as you know, NSI has ambitions to create continental platforms, platforms that go beyond just domestic infrastructure investing into infrastructure investing continent-wide. And I think Djibouti, a combination of its people, a combination of the infrastructure opportunities here, a combination of the reform actually lends itself to a potential location. Of course, with a like-minded sovereign wealth fund, lends itself to a jurisdiction where we can do business, honestly.
Thank you very much for the question. So far we have been very cautious about the Africa, the Latin America, but now we are seeing that the region, especially Africa, is evolving. And if we come back to our first investment in Africa and via the IFC funds, I think one of the main risks that we have encountered at that time, it was the currency risk. Although most of our investments within the fund was very successful, unfortunately, lack of the right instruments in terms of the hedging was main of the, I would say, the reason that we have stepped back a little bit. Now it's the time. Probably there is a lot of representation from the DFIs and the multinationals. I think this policy dialogue is very important for us to see what's happening really in this engagement, and to see where this blended finance structures can be to help this play risks. So we are to learn. Thank you.
Mon ami m'a exclu de la question, mais il va quand même m'entendre, d'autant plus que je vais le laisser tranquille pendant quelques jours, je m'en vais tout à l'heure. Et je veux donner l'exemple, l'essentiel a été effectivement bien répondu, et je n'ai pas beaucoup de choses à rajouter, sinon que Djibouti, malgré sa petite taille, fait partie d'un ensemble de pays qui veulent faire une intégration régionale. Djibouti fait partie de l'IGAD, du COMESA, de la ZECAF. Nous faisons partie de toutes ces structures pour passer le handicap de la petite taille. Donc de la petite taille, on voudrait donc le transformer en avantage avec les arguments que nous avons. Nous avons une monnaie librement convertible qui a 76 ans. C'est une des plus vieilles monnaies de l'Afrique, de par son âge, même si nous sommes un des pays les plus petits, 48 ans bientôt, notre monnaie est une des plus vieilles, la plus stable. L'inflation, basse inflation, et puis les constructions en cours pour servir non seulement Djibouti, mais ce que nous voulons faire à Demerjo, par exemple, ce sont des installations régionales. Nous projetons de faire une raffinerie. Nous allons faire une route financée par l'Afrique en développement pour relier les pays du littoral, Somalie, Somaliland, Somalie, toute la région. Deuxième route vers l'utopie. Il y a tellement de projets qui vont dans le sens de l'intégration de l'Afrique. L'Afrique a un potentiel extraordinaire. Population, vous l'avez dit, jeunesse. Nous devons travailler sur l'éducation, sur le renforcement des capacités, les ouvertures des frontières, pour que ces marchés se développent, pour que l'industrie intra-africaine se développe, pour que nous puissions aussi, à travers nos moyens d'interconnexion, d'échange avec le Afrexim Bank a fait, le système de paiement panafricain qui travaille, nous sommes membres, nous avons travaillé ensemble pour les construire, soit utile et sortir un peu des sentiers battus, d'avoir à transférer à New York pour acheter en utopie, alors que nous avons une balance commerciale très complémentaire. Voilà. Merci.
Merci, Mr. Guna. I'm the moderator, but if you don't mind, I'd love to answer the question as well. And the reason, my first time here, and the reason I'm here is because I really believe, and you saw maybe from the numbers, the way Africa is going to develop is we're going to have these centers of excellences across many of our countries, and we're seeing more and more of them. And as I looked at the numbers, I was just quite impressed by this small country, Djibouti, and the sort of the macro and what you're seeing. And then you hear the stories out there, and I'm like, let me come see for myself. Let me come and see what's happening here. What can we learn from here? How can we use this as an opportunity, of course, to help Djibouti grow faster, but then to export this to other African countries so we can see many more African countries rising. So that's why I'm here. And thanks for the invitation. We're out of time, so I have just one last question for my panelists, and it's just finish this sentence for me, right? Just finish this sentence for me, which is, come invest in Africa because, or venir investir à Djibouti, pourquoi? Parce que
c'est rentable, parce qu'il y a un marché, parce qu'il y a un retour sur investissement qui est garanti, parce que il y a liberté de mouvement des capitaux, comme je l'ai dit, la rentabilité, le profit est récupérable. C'est-à-dire que la plupart des investisseurs étrangers sont souvent inquiets de la dévaluation, de la capacité de récupérer son capital après l'investissement. La durée, la longévité, la stabilité de Djibouti, du franc Djibouti, garantit cela. Donc, s'il y a un endroit pour éviter ce risque-là, c'est bien Djibouti. Merci.
Retour sur investissement pratiquement garanti. I love it.
That if we take the Djibouti as a case, as I said, the first, the macroeconomic stability, including the currency stability, is very important. Second, the consistency. Third, probably the political stability, and the great leadership coming by the country's leadership. I mean, the visionary leadership coming from the country leadership, especially when you set up the sovereign wealth fund. I think it was very unique and probably one of the first this kind of fund in the entire continent. Thank you.
Stability, consistency, and leadership. Aminu.
To complete your sentence, right? Yes. So it would be because you can make money and do tremendous impact at the same time.
Do good and do well.
Indeed.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, come and invest in Djibouti because of stable long-term return. I invested in Djibouti in my previous life. None of those deals have gone wrong. The banks are here, they can tell you. I lent to Djibouti banks. They are in the room, they're here. None of them have gone wrong. Come lend money to Djibouti. Premier Invest will bring investors, we shall lend to Djibouti because we've got stable return, we've got honest people, and we've got a potential which is exponential in the sub-region. Thank you.
Stable returns. Thank you very much.
Dire au revoir. Next to this is the best panel. No, this has
Thank you very much, Dr. Leke, your wonderful panelists, for such an interesting conversation, and we loved that last question.
Merci beaucoup, c'était top. Hein? C'est un grand plaisir.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Vous avez bien répondu à la question. Bravo. Quelqu'un qui a un avion,
Let's now wrap up today's program. It has been very, very dynamic. I'll just let everyone settle in the room, and we will close very, very shortly. So to close today's programs, I would like to call now Mrs. Matima Shangala from Afrexim Bank, one of the continent's leading institutions, and she will invite us all to an important event later in the year. Let's welcome Mrs. Shangala, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening. Thank you. So my name is Matimba Changala, and I work for the African Export and Import Bank. We're a multilateral financial institution headquartered in Cairo, Egypt. We have 5 regional offices on the African continent, including 1 office in the Caribbean, with 65 participating African countries, and 12 countries in the Caribbean are participating members of the bank, plus the African countries. In total, we have 65 member countries. So I'll just do a quick presentation. I know I'm standing in between dinner, the end of the program, to just invite you to one of our flagship initiatives called the Intra-African Trade Fair. So we host one of Africa's biggest trade fair. It's a biannual trade fair. We hold it every 2 years. And this year's trade fair will be hosted in Algiers, from the 4th to the 8th of September. We host it in collaboration with the African Union Commission, the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, and it's the AFCFTA Marketplace. So it's a platform that ideally exposes you to the 1.4 billion people on the African continent with a combined GDP of 3.6 trillion. Just to highlight the main objectives of our trade fair is our trade fair is basically aimed at creating a platform for buyers and sellers to exchange their goods and services. I'll just ask if you could scroll down, please. So it's an opportunity for you to bring your investment opportunities and look for potential investors. It's also a B2B platform that allows you to engage with governments, with the private sector, and also we like to use it as a platform to promote the bank's finance facilities and initiatives. In addition, we invite other financial institutions, so you will not only be exposed to the bank, but all the other financial institutions who could support your investment and support your growth. We also use it as a platform for tradable and trade facilitating activities. So we have other verticals on the platform, such as promotion of the creative and cultural industry. We have an automotive show. So various sector-specific initiatives take place as part of this platform. Next slide, please. So I'll just highlight the main verticals of the trade fair. So you can participate in our trade fair in various ways and forms. You could come in just as a visitor. You could take an exhibition stand and be an exhibitor. You come in as a delegate. You could participate in our trade and investment program as a speaker, or you could come through for some of our specialized products, such as the automotive fair. Let me just highlight what we have done so far with the trade fair. So we've had the trade fair, the first trade fair was held in 2018 in Egypt, Cairo, and you will see from the screen our numbers. I'll just highlight the 2023 numbers when we had the trade fair in Cairo, Egypt. So we had 1,932 exhibitors, 28 visitors, and 130 participating countries from across the globe, and over 43 billion in trade and investment deals. What you see for 2025 are our projections and what we are targeting for this year. So participating in the fair exposes you to over 140 countries, as well as investment deals projected at 44 billion. So we've had those 4 trade fairs so far. This just shows you the type of participants that we receive at the trade fair. So both private, public sector, NGOs are some of the diverse participants we get. Next slide, please. And it's a multi-sector forum, so we don't focus on a few sectors. We focus on all the sectors that you see on the screen. I won't go into detail on them, but just highlighting that it's multi-sector, cuts across different sectors that we focus on. So I'll highlight just some of our main verticals of the trade fair. So we have a trade exhibition that runs throughout the fair. So this is a 7-day program. So if you take an exhibition booth or a pavilion, you will be able to exhibit for the 7 days of the forum. And in addition to that, you're exposed to other things such as the Trade and Investment Forum and the B2B engagements that happen at the booths. Next slide. We also have a dedicated Creative Africa Nexus program, which we call CANEX. So this CANEX program focuses on the creative industries. We bring people from the diaspora, from Africa, to showcase the various creatives that we have on the continent. So we focus on music, film, fashion, literature, gastronomy, as some of the verticals of the Creative Africa Nexus. In addition, we have master classes and training that we do as part of the CANEX program, as well as B2B engagements. We have a dedicated 4-day trade and investment forum. So this is a platform that allows you to engage with investors, with potential funders, and to bring your investment project so that you could engage with the investors on the platform. If you are a sponsor, you can also you can also participate as a speaker. You can also engage us about speaking opportunities, our main trade and investment forum. We also have dedicated B2B and B2G platforms, so we'll have a space dedicated for that. You can also book for meetings on we have an app that you can download. You can find the information as well on the website once you do the registration. And then we have a dedicated automotive show. So this allows African equipment manufacturers, original equipment manufacturers, assemblers, and various companies that manufacture car components to showcase what Africa is able to produce in the automotive sector. And as part of that, we have a dedicated auto forum where we have conversations about the opportunities, the challenges that are available in this sector on the continent. And we also have an Africa Union Youth Startup Program where we allow youths from across the continent, from the Caribbean, from the diaspora, to showcase their innovations, their prototypes, and meet with potential funders, entrepreneurs, and investors who could invest and upscale some of these opportunities coming from the youth. At the last Inter-Africa Trade Fair that we had in 2023, we felt we needed to have a day dedicated to Africa's diaspora. So we have a day that we dedicate for Africa's global diaspora to engage on the commercial and investment opportunities between Africa and its diaspora. So we have a day dedicated to that. It includes a gastronomy showcase, a summit, as well as B2B engagements. And then we also dedicate special days that we make available to private companies or to countries that would like to have a day dedicated to them to attract investment. So for instance, we could have a Djibouti Day dedicated to Djibouti for them to attract investors and have engagements and invite private as well as government sector. So we curate a program for you to meet your needs, to attract investors, or to speak about the opportunities in a particular country. For this year, for example, we're working, Arise have taken up one of the days, which we're calling Arise Industrialization Day. So they're using that as an opportunity to attract investors into their industrial parks. So I'd like to invite some of the private sector in the room to engage us about, taking up a day at the Inter-Africa Trade Fair. Next slide. We've introduced for the first time an Africa Research and Innovation Platform. So we recognize that there's a lot of innovations that the African continent is producing, research papers that are being done, but most of them are ending, on the bookshelves in these various countries, and they're not being taken to market. So we've made a call to various research institutions, universities to submit papers, publications, and we'll be able to showcase those at the trade fair, and we'll also create an opportunity for those innovations to meet potential investors, financiers, basically to see how those inventions can be taken to scale and being made commercially viable. Next slide. In addition to the trade fair, we run a 24-hour virtual platform that, our trade fair happens only twice a year, but we have a virtual platform where you can participate as an exhibitor, visit our IATF on this virtual platform that runs throughout the year. So you can still take up an exhibition space, and people will still be able to view your stand and see what products and services you offer on the virtual platform. And then last but not least, we have a dedicated day for African regions, so African sub-sovereign governments, so African states, provinces, regions. We invite mayors, governors, premiers to this forum where they discuss how to attract investment and development in specific regions in Africa. We've had four conferences so far. This year's conference, which is being held at the Inter-African Trade Fair, will be the 5th in the series. And so we'd like to invite people in the room that are looking for opportunities to invest in specific regions in Africa that would like to engage with sub-sovereign governments across the continent to please participate in this. I will end here. Mine was a brief presentation, but I would just like to emphasize and call you all to participate. It's Africa's biggest trade fair. There's lots of opportunities and avenues that you can participate, so engage us. I am available for further meetings and engagements. I can share my business card. We have some brochures. If you would like to participate either as a visitor, a delegate, or an exhibitor or a speaker, we can have a discussion about that. Thanks a lot to the organizers, and have a good evening.
That was wonderful, Mrs. Shangala. Thank you very much. Invitation well received. I don't know if you can hear me. Well, this brings us to the end of the first day of this Djibouti Forum 2025. Before we say goodbye, au revoir, two little requests. Please leave your headsets on the seats or hand them to one of our hostesses. And I would ask you to kindly leave the room as quickly as possible because, as you can see, the team is getting it ready for dinner. As for me, I would like to tell you all à demain. See you tomorrow. We'll continue with the same level of insightful conversations. Bonne soirée.